This assassin turned himself in to the police after every 100 kills, but he wasn't confessing out of guilt. He simply thought the jail cells were more comfortable than any hotel. After a good night's sleep, Hawk smashed through the prison door with ease. Then he casually walked out of the jail and began another day of hunting. The strangest part was, this man had supposedly been killed by a nuclear bomb 30 years ago. Yet somehow, he had come back to life. And now, he had only one goal: kill Lupin III. Lupin and his crew immediately fought back, but Hawk blocked every bullet with nothing but a single axe. Realizing they were completely outmatched, Lupin and the others ran for their lives, but Hawk refused to let them escape. Just as they were about to be caught, the world's greatest swordsman, Gourmet Ishikawa, cut down a massive tree to block Hawk's path. Then Gourmet unleashed his strongest attack, but Hawk caught the blade with only 2 fingers. The next second, Hawk swung his enormous battle axe. Then he finished Gourmet off with a devastating palm strike that sent him flying. Luckily, Lupin rescued him in time, but from that moment on, Gourmet's confidence was completely shattered. He retreated deep into the mountains. There, he pushed himself through brutal training. He had to defeat Hawk, but fear continued to consume him. Even a shark leaping out of the water looked like Hawk charging at him with his giant axe. Even after being bitten, Gourmet still couldn't bring himself to draw his sword. Hawk's towering figure never left his mind. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Gourmet hadn't taken a single sip of water. The wounds on his back had only gotten worse, but he had no more time to train. Hawk's pursuit of Lupin had indirectly caused Gourmet's employer to die. The employer's son gave Gourmet an order. He had 3 days to kill Hawk. Now the deadline had arrived. The employer's men found Gourmet. They came to execute him for failing the mission. One of them even stepped on his chest. At that very moment, a new power awakened inside Gourmet. He could suddenly see his enemy's next move before they made it. As one thug raised an iron rod, Gourmet instantly drew his sword. A split second later, the man collapsed. Everyone who stood in Gourmet's way fell one after another. But when the employer's son fired a shot, Gourmet didn't dodge. He accepted it as his way of repaying the kindness his former employer had shown him. Now he had only one mission left: defeat Hawk and reclaim his honor. Meanwhile, Hawk had cornered Lupin and Jigen. The two hid inside an abandoned temple, but Hawk found them anyway. He hurled a massive boulder, leaving both of them seriously injured. Just when all hope seemed lost, Gourmet arrived. Without hesitation, he drew his sword and attacked, but Hawk caught the strike with one hand. The impact launched Gourmet all the way onto the roof. Wanting to end the fight quickly, Hawk began chopping through the support pillars. The entire building collapsed. Gourmet struggled out of the rubble. Only then did Hawk notice that his hand had been cut. To Hawk, it was nothing more than a scratch, so he charged again. But this time, Gourmet saw Hawk's next move before it happened. Although Hawk's attack slashed Gourmet's arm, Gourmet used that opening to sever one of Hawk's arms. The unbearable pain made Hawk tremble uncontrollably. Even then, he still refused to give up. He prepared to attack once more, but in the very next second, his instincts warned him if he took one more step forward, the next thing to hit the ground would be his own head. Realizing he had no chance of winning, Hawk finally admitted defeat. He chose to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Which is stronger, traditional Chinese medicine or modern Western medicine? A blind traditional Chinese medicine simply walked past Black Jack and quickly figured out that Black Jack was a surgeon who performed operations on patients. The old doctor warned him not to rely too much on surgery or medicine. He believed the human body shouldn't be cut open unless absolutely necessary. Instead, it should heal itself just like animals do. Although his philosophy was completely different from Black Jack's, Black Jack didn't argue with him. Soon after, he arrived at a patient's house. To his surprise, the patient who had been critically ill had already made a miraculous recovery. Black Jack immediately asked the patient's mother what had happened. She explained that an elderly man had stopped by earlier. Without asking a single question, he simply inserted one acupuncture needle. A short time later, the patient had regained enough strength to eat. Hearing this, Black Jack realized it was the same old doctor he had just met. Even though the old man was blind, he could identify a patient's illness simply by detecting their scent. Then he treated them with acupuncture. He never charged a penny. After curing one patient, he would immediately move on to the next. Even more amazing, almost everyone he treated made a full recovery within 3 or 4 days. After hearing all of this, Black Jack went to find the old doctor. He told him not to treat his patients without permission. The old doctor simply smiled. He said saving lives wasn't about who got the credit. Helping patients was a doctor's responsibility. If Black Jack was worried about losing patients, he should cure them before anyone else could. Black Jack was about to respond, but the old doctor was surrounded by another patient's family. They begged him to make a house call. Just then, the old doctor caught the scent of someone who was even more seriously ill. He immediately rushed to the patient's home. Although the young woman had already scheduled an appointment with Black Jack, the old doctor gave her an acupuncture treatment first. But this time, something went terribly wrong. As soon as Black Jack heard what had happened, he hurried over. The old doctor remained completely confident. He insisted there was no way he had made a mistake. But when Black Jack brought him to see the young woman, she was curled up on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. It turned out she suffered from an extreme fear of needles. That was exactly why Black Jack had been treating her with medication instead of acupuncture. The old doctor's mistake came from being too confident in his own judgment. Black Jack told him that every doctor must first understand a patient's condition before deciding on a treatment. After hearing those words, the old doctor quietly lowered his head. He accepted his mistake and learned an important lesson. Sometime later, he visited Black Jack's house to repay him for the valuable advice. He inserted a single acupuncture needle into Black Jack's foot. It turned out that during their very first meeting, the old doctor had already noticed, through his extraordinary sense of smell, that Black Jack suffered from stomach problems. This time, he cured them completely. Black Jack thanked the old doctor. He promised that if the old doctor ever became sick, he would treat him free of charge. The old doctor simply smiled. Then he said, "If I ever get sick, I'll just give myself another acupuncture needle." The boy kept scratching his head. Before long a pile of dandruff had collected on the paper. He gave it a hard blow. In an instant it became a beautiful painting of Mount Fuji. Just then, someone knocked on the door. Sunio quickly hid inside the closet. It turned out he hadn't paid his rent for 6 months. The landlord had even brought a new tenant to see the room. Meguro was very interested in the painting on the door. The landlord, however, was furious. He immediately checked the room to see if anything else had been damaged. That's when he found Sunio sleeping inside the closet. The landlord ordered him to pack his things and leave immediately. To everyone's surprise, Meguro allowed Sunio to stay. But there was one condition. He could only live inside the closet. Sunio gladly agreed. After all, the closet was his favorite place to be. Meguro explained that this was called returning to the womb. When humans are still babies, they also live in a small enclosed space, so staying inside the closet felt just like being back inside a mother's womb. Whenever he got bored, Sunio would draw inside the closet. The more he drew, the more obsessed he became. He was extremely proud of his artwork. Eventually he decided to publish it, but the moment he stepped outside, the sunlight overwhelmed him and he collapsed. When the landlord heard what had happened, he worried about being held responsible. He insisted that Sunio move out, so Meguro prepared a brand new room just for him. The room had everything he needed. Sunio loved it. His inspiration never stopped flowing. He created one masterpiece after another. Meanwhile, Meguro delivered his manuscripts to a publisher. After reading them, the publisher was thrilled. At the same time, Sunio continued working hard on new stories. One day, Meguro brought him a huge stack of fan letters. Sunio was overjoyed. He believed he had finally become a famous manga artist. He imagined luxury cars, beautiful women, and the dream life he had always wanted. Thinking about all that, he decided to step outside for a walk, but the room wouldn't open at all. Then he remembered Meguro's warning. He was never supposed to leave. He became convinced that Meguro was using him as nothing more than a money-making machine. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he became. He pounded on the walls with all his strength, desperately trying to escape. After struggling for what felt like forever, the door finally opened, but the moment he stepped out, everything around him lit up. The blinding sunlight shined directly onto him once again. Sunio begged Meguro to let him go back into the room, but Meguro knew that no one could spend their entire life living in darkness. He told Sunio to get used to the sunlight instead. A few days later, Meguro came back to check on him. To his surprise, Sunio was still hiding in the shadows, refusing to come out. This is a tongueworm worth 2 billions. It may look disgusting, but its tongue is considered a world-class delicacy. The meat is incredibly tender and springy. After eating several tongueworm, Toriko recovered about 20% of his energy, but Zebra needed to store 4.5 million calories. That was more than the other 3 Heavenly Kings combined. To activate his echo map as quickly as possible and find Komatsu, Zebra and Toriko ate almost every monster they came across. After devouring a level 45 saber-toothed tiger, Zebra's energy climbed to 40%. The two continued deeper into the gourmet pyramid. Before long, they encountered a level 63 Hell Cerberus. To help Zebra conserve his strength, Toriko decided to fight alone. He easily dodged the beast's attacks, then he knocked it back with a flying fork. A moment later, he followed up with a 15-hit nail punch. One of the 3 heads was destroyed instantly. Just as Toriko was about to finish off the other 2, a gigantic wolf claw suddenly came crashing down. At the critical moment, Zebra blocked the deadly strike with his own arm. Then he let out a thunderous roar. He slammed the Cerberus with a brutal elbow strike. Finally, he grabbed one of its horns and smashed the monster straight into the wall. Meanwhile, Komatsu was searching for Toriko and Zebra. Suddenly, a gigantic one-eyed frog appeared right in front of him. Terrified, Komatsu stumbled backward. Fortunately, he barely managed to dodge the frog's attacks. Just as he breathed a sigh of relief, he turned around and froze. Dozens of ancient coffins were lined up before him. At the center of the chamber, a glowing ancient book rested on a stone altar. Komatsu hurried over to examine it, but the moment he reached for the book, a terrifying birdman suddenly appeared behind him. The creature opened its enormous mouth and lunged straight at Komatsu. Panicked, Komatsu turned and ran for his life. At the last possible second, the sound barrier Zebra had left behind blocked the fatal attack, but that only enraged the birdman even more. It launched an even fiercer assault to avoid becoming its next meal. Komatsu could only crawl and scramble away as fast as he could. Then, out of nowhere, a one-eyed monster appeared and blocked his path. Komatsu thought it was all over, but in the very next second, the 2 monsters suddenly started fighting each other. Seizing the opportunity, Komatsu grabbed the ancient book and escaped. Meanwhile, after eating non-stop, Toriko and Zebra finally restored all of their energy. Zebra let out a mighty roar. A massive wave of sound energy spread in every direction. His echo map instantly covered the entire gourmet pyramid. It quickly pinpointed Komatsu's location, but Zebra immediately sensed that Komatsu was in danger. Sure enough, after turning a corner, Komatsu came face to face with a terrifying monster. It was the ruler of the gourmet pyramid, the golden lion masked beast. Zebra immediately unleashed a sonic illusion, hoping to scare the creature away, but the golden lion masked beast simply let out a deafening roar. In an instant, Zebra's sonic illusion was completely shattered.